The alarm bells of Nexus Prime Academy screamed across the crystalline halls like banshees announcing the end of times. Cadet Jake Morrison sat in advanced xenobiology, twirling his father's old ballpoint pen between his fingers, watching Professor Zethkar's mandibles click nervously as she tried to maintain composure. "Now, class, remember that the Vorthak are merely theoretical apex predators," she chittered, her compound eyes reflecting the emergency lights. "The probability of encountering them is 0.001%. Jake snorted. "Yeah, well, my dad always said probability was just math's way of lying to your face." The Zilithian professor's antennae twitched with annoyance. "Cadet Morrison, your species' tendency toward inappropriate humor during crisis situations is precisely why humans remain on academic probation at this institution." Before Jake could fire back with another sarcastic gem, the lights cut out completely. Emergency power kicked in 3 seconds later, bathing everything in a hellish red glow. That's when they heard it, the sound that made every non-human student's blood freeze in their veins. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the Academy's titanium hull itself. "Oh, scrap," whispered Kira, the blue-skinned Altarian sitting next to Jake. Her usually confident demeanor crumbled like wet cardboard. "That's impossible. The Vorthak were contained on the prison world of Kepler 442b, the Galactic Council assured everyone. Jake's grip tightened on his pen. "Let me guess. The same Galactic Council that said Earth was too primitive to join their little space club." The intercom crackled to life with the voice of Commandant Vex'thul, a battle-scarred Draconian whose reputation preceded him across 12 star systems. "All students report to designated safe zones immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Multiple hostile entities have breached the outer perimeter." Through the reinforced windows, Jake could see sleek, black shapes moving with predatory grace across the Academy's courtyard. The Vorthak were everything the textbooks said they were, and worse. 8 feet of pure killing machine, with obsidian exoskeletons that seemed to absorb light itself, razor-sharp claws that could slice through battle armor like tissue paper, and those eyes, those terrible, intelligent eyes that burned like crimson stars in the darkness. "Sweet mother of cosmic irony," Jake muttered. "The universe really does have a twisted sense of humor." Professor Zethkar was frantically tapping her communication device. "Security isn't responding. The main defensive grid is offline. How is this possible?" One of the creatures turned toward their window, and Jake felt his blood turn to ice water. It wasn't just looking at them. It was studying them, like a chef deciding which ingredient to add to the soup first. "Everyone remain calm," the professor squeaked, which was about as reassuring as a paper umbrella in a meteor shower. "The Academy's defensive systems are state-of-the-art. Surely they can handle a few escaped specimens." That's when the first scream echoed through the corridors. Jake's classmates were losing it. Kira was hyperventilating into her breathing apparatus. Tom, a normally cocky Centaurian with more attitude than brain cells, was whimpering in the corner like a scared puppy. Even Rex, the hulking Gorthan who could bench press a small shuttle, looked ready to wet himself. "Fantastic," Jake said, standing up and pocketing his pen. "Looks like it's amateur hour at the Nexus Prime Survival Academy. Where are you going?" Professor Zethkar's voice climbed 3 octaves. "To do what humans do best, teach." Jake's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Improvise." The classroom door had barely slid open when Jake came face to face with death itself. A Vorthak stood in the hallway, its massive frame blocking out the emergency lighting. Its claws dripped with something Jake really didn't want to identify, and its mandibles spread wide, revealing rows of teeth that would make a great white shark jealous. "Well, hello there, gorgeous," Jake said conversationally. "I don't suppose you're here for career counseling?" The creature lunged with inhuman speed, claws aimed directly for Jake's throat. In that split second, time seemed to slow down. Jake could hear his father's voice from years ago, back when the old soldier was teaching him barroom survival tactics on Earth. "Son, it ain't about the size of the weapon. It's about knowing exactly where to stick it." Jake sidestepped the attack with dancer-like precision, his pen already in motion. The ballpoint slid between the creature's exoskeleton plates, like it was meant to be there, finding the one vulnerable spot every Academy textbook said didn't exist. The pen punctured straight through to the Vorthak's primary neural cluster. The alien apex predator dropped like a sack of space potatoes. "Holy Quasar," breathed Tom from behind him. "You just killed a Vorthak with a writing instrument." "Not just any writing instrument," Jake corrected, pulling his pen free and wiping it clean on the creature's hide. "A Bic ballpoint, vintage 2387. Earth manufacturing at its finest. They don't make M like this anymore." The intercom crackled again. "All remaining students and faculty, emergency evacuation protocols are in effect. The Vorthak have taken control of levels 7 through 12. Repeat, levels 7 through 12 are compromised." Jake did some quick mental math. The safe zones were on level 3. They were currently on level 9. Between them and safety stood approximately 40 floors of Academy corridors, emergency staircases, and an unknown number of the galaxy's most efficient killing machines. "Well, class," he said, turning back to his terrified classmates, "looks like today's lesson just became Practical Survival 101. Professor Zethkar's mandibles were chattering like castanets. "Morrison, you cannot possibly be suggesting we attempt to reach the safe zones. The statistical probability of survival is negligible at best." "Professor, with all due respect to your impressive collection of degrees," Jake replied, checking the corridor both ways, "statistics are what got us into this mess. Time for some good old-fashioned human logic." He started walking toward the emergency stairwell, pen ready in his grip. Behind him, he could hear his classmates whispering among themselves in a dozen different languages, all variations of the same theme. The human had lost his mind. "Are we really following the crazy Earth boy into certain death?" whispered Kira. "Do you have a better plan?" Rex rumbled back. "Actually, yes. We could barricade ourselves in the classroom and wait for rescue." Jake paused at the stairwell door and looked back at them. "By all means, feel free to wait. I'm sure help is on the way." Right after they finished dealing with a small matter of apex predators treating this academy like their personal all-you-can-eat buffet. The sound of tearing metal echoed from somewhere above them, followed by more screams. On second thought, Kira said quickly, "I've always wanted to see how humans handle impossible odds." They made it down 2 levels before encountering the next Vorthak. This one was bigger than the first, with scars across its exoskeleton that suggested it had survived more than a few battles. It was crouched over something that Jake's brain refused to fully process, too busy making wet, crunching sounds. "Stay back," Jake whispered to the group. "And whatever happens, don't make any sudden movements. These things hunt by motion and scent. How do you know so much about Vorthak hunting patterns?" Professor Zethkar whispered back, "Because, unlike the rest of the galaxy, humans actually read the classified reports we're not supposed to have access to." The creature looked up from its meal, crimson eyes locking onto Jake's position. For a moment, they stared at each other across the blood-stained corridor. Jake could feel the weight of its intelligence, calculating, measuring, deciding whether he was worth the effort. "That's right, you overgrown cockroach," Jake murmured. "I'm just a soft, squishy human. Barely worth your time." The Vorthak rose to its full height, nearly scraping the ceiling. It took one step forward, then another. Jake's grip on his pen tightened until his knuckles went white. "Come on then," he breathed. "Let's dance." The creature charged, and Jake smiled grimly, because there was one thing every alien species in the galaxy consistently underestimated about humans. They always assumed the weapons were the dangerous part. They never expected the mind wielding them to be the real threat. As the Vorthak's claws swept toward him, Jake was already moving, already thinking 3 steps ahead. His pen found its target with surgical precision, sliding between armor plates to pierce the secondary nerve cluster this time. The creature stumbled but didn't drop. "Interesting," Jake said, dancing back as razor claws whistled past his face. "You're learning. Too bad I'm better at adapting than you are." His second strike hit the primary spinal junction. The Vorthak collapsed, twitching once before going still. "2 down," Jake announced cheerfully to his stunned audience. Roughly 38 to go. Give or take a few. The group stared at him like he'd just announced his intention to juggle plasma grenades. "You're insane," Kira whispered, but there was something like admiration in her voice now. "Probably," Jake agreed, "but insanity is just another word for thinking outside the box. And right now, that box is looking pretty cramped." They continued their descent, and with each level, Jake's legend grew. By the 5th Vorthak, he wasn't just killing them, he was making it look easy. By the 7th, his classmates had stopped flinching and started watching with fascination. By the 10th, they were starting to believe they might actually make it out alive. That's when they reached level 3, and Jake saw something that made his blood run cold. The safe zone doors were sealed shut, and scratched deep into the titanium were words that chilled him to the bone. "No human entry. Galactic Council Emergency Protocol 7. Well, Jake said, his voice deadly calm, "isn't that just perfect?" The silence that followed Jake's discovery stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. His classmates gathered around the sealed safe zone doors, reading the scratch message over and over, as if staring at it long enough might change the words. "Protocol 7, Professor Vex'thul whispered, her compound eyes reflecting the harsh emergency lighting. "I have never heard of such a directive." Jake's laugh was bitter enough to corrode steel plating. "Of course you haven't, Professor. That's because Protocol 7 is what the Galactic Council uses when they want certain species to disappear during a crisis. Conveniently." "That cannot be true," Rex protested, his massive Gorthan frame trembling with disbelief. "The Council represents all civilized species equally." "Does it now?" Jake turned to face them, and his expression was colder than the vacuum of space. "Tell me, Rex, how many humans sit on the Galactic Council?" The silence answered for him. "0, Jake continued. "How many human colonies receive Council protection funding?" 0. "How many human-designed technologies are used in Council defensive systems?" Also 0. Seeing a pattern here, Tom's tentacles writhed nervously. But surely they would not deliberately exclude U.S. from safety during a Vorthak attack. The political ramifications alone would be catastrophic. Would they? Jake pulled out his pen, examining its simple design with newfound appreciation. Hard to have political ramifications when there are no witnesses left to testify. Another roar echoed to the corridor behind them, closer this time. Much closer. "The Vorthak are hurting us," Jake realized suddenly. This entire attack was coordinated. They drove everyone toward the safe zones, knowing full well that humans would be locked out. We were supposed to be the appetizers while everyone else gets to safety. Kira's blue skin had turned an alarming shade of pale green. "You mean this was planned?" The Council deliberately orchestrated a Vorthak attack to eliminate human students. "Think about it," Jake said, his voice growing harder with each word. "How exactly do apex predators from a maximum security prison world suddenly appear in the middle of the galaxy's most prestigious academy? These things do not travel in groups. They do not coordinate attacks. And they sure as hell do not break out containment without help." The sound of claws scraping against metal grew louder. "We need to move," Rex urged. "This philosophical discussion can wait until we are not about to become alien lunch." "Actually, Rex, this philosophical discussion just became our survival strategy." Jake's smile was sharp enough to cut through the tension. "Because if the Council wants humans eliminated, then clearly they consider us a threat. And if we are such a threat, while unarmed and outnumbered, imagine what we can accomplish when we stop playing by their rules." He started walking back toward the stairwell, away from the sealed safe zone. "Where are you going?" Professor Vex'thul called after him. "To give the Galactic Council exactly what they deserve," Jake replied. "A demonstration of why they should have been afraid of humans all along." "Morrison, you cannot possibly intend to fight your way through the entire Vorthak pack," the professor protested. "Why not?" Jake paused at the stairwell entrance. "They are just oversized insects with attitude problems. I have already killed 10 of them. What is 20 more?" 30 more, corrected Tom nervously. "According to the emergency broadcasts, there are 40 Vorthak loose in the academy." 40? Jake's grin widened. "Well, that does change things." Finally, you are seeing reason, sighed Professor Zefkar. Absolutely. 40 means I get to set a new personal record. Before anyone could stop him, Jake was through the stairwell door and climbing upward. After a moment of stunned silence, his classmates followed, because somewhere in the last hour, the crazy human with the pen had become their best chance of survival. They found the first group of Vorthak on level 5, clustered around what had once been the Academy's central computer core. The creatures were not just destroying equipment randomly. They were systematically dismantling specific components, removing tracking devices and communication arrays with surgical precision. They know exactly what they are targeting. Jake observed quietly. Someone gave them detailed schematics. Impossible, breathed Rex. The Vorthak are intelligent, but they do not possess technological knowledge. No, but their handlers do. Jake studied the scene with calculating eyes. The question is, who benefits from the Academy's defensive grid being permanently offline? The answer hit him like a plasma bolt to the chest. The slave raids, he whispered. What? Kira moved closer. The Centauri slave raids that have been hitting human colonies for the past 6 months. Every time we ask the Council for protection, they claim their defensive fleets are tied up in essential operations. But what if those operations include kidnapping human civilians for the illegal labor markets? Professor Zefkar's mandibles clicked frantically. That is a serious accusation, Morrison. The Council would never sanction such activities. Would not they? Jake's voice carried the weight of accumulated betrayals. Think about it, Professor. Humans are physically stronger than most galactic species. We adapt to hostile environments better, we breed faster, and we are supposedly too primitive to complain to higher authorities. We are the perfect slave labor force. One of the Vorthak turned at the sound of voices. Its crimson eyes locked onto their position, and it let out a hunting call that was answered by its packmates. Enough philosophy, Jake said, rolling his shoulders. Time for practical application. What followed was not a battle. It was an art exhibition, with Jake as the master painter and Vorthak blood as his medium. He moved through the creatures like death incarnate, his humble ballpoint pen finding every vulnerable spot with mechanical precision. But this time was different. This time, he was not just fighting to survive. He was fighting with purpose, with fury, with the accumulated rage of every human who had ever been dismissed as primitive, overlooked as irrelevant, or sacrificed as acceptable losses. The first Vorthak fell with Jake's pen through its primary visual cortex. The second died when the pen punctured its respiratory system. The third, fourth, and fifth went down so quickly that his classmates could barely follow movements. Incredible, breathed Tom. You are not just killing them. You are dissecting them. Anatomy lessons, Jake replied grimly, sidestepping razor claws and delivering another fatal strike. Turns out all those mandatory xenobiology courses were good for something after all. By the time the last Vorthak on level 5 collapsed, Jake's audience had grown. Security cameras throughout the Academy were broadcasting a performance to anyone still alive to watch. In the safe zones, students and faculty from dozens of worlds stared at their screens in amazement as a single human cadet systematically dismantled the galaxy's most feared predators. Level 6, Jake announced, wiping his pen clean once again. Who wants to place bets on how many we find up there? They found 12. Jake killed them all in under 10 minutes. Level 7 held 15 more. They lasted 8 minutes. By level 10, word had spread beyond the Academy. Throughout the Galactic Council chambers, emergency sessions were being called. Defense contractors were frantically recalculating their threat assessments of human capabilities. Slave traders were quietly canceling raids on human colonies. And in the depths of space, human naval commanders who had been denied council membership for decades were suddenly receiving very polite diplomatic overtures. Final level, Jake said as they climbed toward the Academy's apex. This is where we find whoever is coordinating this circus. The top floor of Nexus Prime Academy housed the administrative offices and the Commandant's personal quarters. It should have been empty, evacuated along with all other non-essential personnel. Instead, they found Commandant Vex'thul standing over a communications array, speaking in hushed tones to someone off-screen. The human element has been more resilient than anticipated, the Draconian was saying. Perhaps we should reconsider the timeline for Phase 2. Jake stepped into the room, his pen ready. Phase 2? Let me guess. After you eliminate the human students, you move on to human colonies? Vex'thul spun around, his reptilian features twisting with surprise and rage. Impossible. The Vorthak should have killed you hours ago. Yeah, well, they tried their best. Jake gestured to his blood-stained uniform. Turns out apex predators bleed just like everything else when you know where to stick the pointy end. You cannot stop what has already begun, human, Vex'thul hissed. Your species is a contamination that threatens a natural order. The Council has voted. Humanity will be cleansed from the galaxy. The Council voted? Jake's laugh was darker than a black hole. How democratic of them. Too bad they forgot to ask humanity for our opinion. Vex'thul reached for his sidearm, but Jake was already moving. The pen flew from his hand like a guided missile, piercing the Draconian's throat with surgical precision. The Commandant collapsed, his communication array flickering and dying. And that, ladies and gentlemen, Jake said to his stunned classmates, is how you handle a hostile takeover. The Academy's intercom crackled to life one final time. But instead of Vex'thul's voice, they heard something else. The sound of human warships dropping out of hyperspace. The United Earth Defense Force had arrived, and they were not in a diplomatic mood. This is Admiral Sarah Chun to all survivors in Nexus Prime Academy. Evacuation shuttles are inbound. Medical teams are standing by. And to whoever orchestrated this attack on human students. The transmission paused ominously. We will be having words. Very sharp words. Jake smiled and pocketed his pen. Around him, his classmates stared with expressions ranging from awe to terror to grudging respect. Well, he said cheerfully, I think my father will be proud. I just turned a writing instrument into a weapon of mass diplomacy. Professor Zethkar's mandibles clicked nervously. Morrison, what happens now? The Council will demand explanations. There will be investigations, tribunals, and political ramifications. Professor, Jake replied, watching through the windows as human warships moved into defensive positions around the Academy. I think the Council has bigger problems than explaining why their apex predators could not handle one human with a pen. In the days that followed, the galaxy would learn a valuable lesson about humanity. They were not primitive. They were not weak. They were not acceptable losses in political games. They were the species that could turn a 40-cent ballpoint pen into the most feared weapon in known space. And they had very long memories when it came to betrayal. The Galactic Council would soon discover that excluding humans from their safe zones had been the worst tactical decision in their history. Because now, humanity knew exactly who their enemies were. And Jake Morrison had just shown them what humans could accomplish when they stopped trying to play nice. The age of human diplomacy was over. The age of human justice had begun.